the Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show on podcast.
My name is Julia, and my father, Chris, was diagnosed with astrocytoma back in 2013 when I was doing my first bachelor degree in product design. And it's quite an interesting start, to be honest, because we didn't find out as soon as he was diagnosed. He must have been diagnosed about maybe December of 2013, maybe November of 2013. But he actually didn't tell my mother or me. My mother was coming in December of that year to see me in London, and she spent probably about a month with us over here. So my parents live in Poland and I live in UK in London. And it was when she was going back that my father didn't really sound like the normal him. When she got back home, it turned out that my father went through the first course of chemo that has completely swiped him off his feet. My mother, well, he got her to swear to him that she won't tell me. My mother was obviously shocked, and my mother and I are very close. So the next thing that my mother did is she called me, and she made sure I wouldn't share any of that experience with him. So now we kind of ended up in this sort of triangle of everybody knowing about the elephant in the room, but nobody wanting to talk about it. So I was trying to find out from my mother, through my mother, what was the state of my dad back then. She didn't really know a lot because for my father it was very unmanly, and I can't even describe. He didn't feel like a man, or like the powerful protector and provider for the family when he was completely swamped off his feet. So he didn't really want to tell her how he was feeling and how he was doing. She would only notice things, and these were the things she would tell me. It was such a big news for me, and I'm also an only child, so I'm the only person that could help or, work with my parents on going through that. So I sought counseling and some sort of mental health support back then through the university that I was attending. I was given a counselor lady who kind of talked me through the stages, how it all works, and what's going to happen next. And the biggest fear for me to address was to tell my dad that I knew and that I wanted to know how he was coping with it. And this was exactly when the counselor lady advised me to just let him speak and see what comes out. But she advised me to create a situation where there would be just the two of us, and where I could talk about feeling safe and how I'm happy that I could share anything with him. And that potentially could spark off a conversation of his problems and where he was coming from. So I did that. I went home for a few days, and I took my father then for a walk, or I can't remember where we went, to be fair. But I've created that situation exactly how the counselor described, and that opened him up to sharing, his experience and what he was going through and all the things he didn't want to tell my mother about, that he was given 6 months to live at that point, that he was really concerned about how my mum will cope without him being around. He made me promise that if the worst comes to worst, I would come over and I would take care of my mother. We're very different, me and my mum. She's a huge panic mode and hysteria and complete meltdown, straight away when things go wrong. Whereas I'm much more focused and I'm capable of pushing all the emotions out the picture and focus on the priorities and what needs to happen. So my father, being aware of that, he wanted to make sure that I would actually take care of mum and give her the space she would need to come back to normal, if you like, and deal with all the things that she wasn't capable, or she would not be capable of dealing with at that point. Now we're 12 years later, I must say it's an interesting experience altogether. Given 6 months to live, it sounds like he's well past his expiry date. Um, he's still with us. He's not the same person he used to be. That's for sure. He has a permanent brain damage where some of the neurons have been affected. He's going to be on psychiatrist monitoring and regular visits for the rest of his life. He's highly medicated for all of the consequences of the damage that the tumor caused. But he's with us, and it's a great feeling to be able to call your dad and just talk to him as and when you need. So what was it like for me when I found out? I couldn't really believe it at first, and I was almost like, he's got no symptoms. Like, he has absolutely zero symptoms in terms of, day-to-day life. So how is this even possible? But then, given the fact that, we found out when he actually was in chemo, and obviously he was suffering all the side effects of chemotherapy, this kind of denial stage, like, very quickly just disappeared, because you can't make, the doctors can't make a mistake and prescribe somebody chemo and they go through it, and, it's just a mistake. There's nothing there. Surely they've checked a number of times. And knowing my father, he did ask for, a second opinion as well, just to be 100% certain. But equally, I don't really remember much from that time. So I can only believe that, I gave my father a lot of space in terms of, you deal with it how you want to deal with it. But I want you to know that I'm here if you ever need. Whereas my mother's approach, obviously, for all of those years, was she needs to take care of him. She's been protecting him. She's been super overprotective to me. She's been always, around him, next to him, and serving him and looking after him and all sorts. So for my mum, this was a very life-changing experience, if you like. I personally think my father has recovered from that experience quite well. I don't think my mother has recovered from it. She still does not trust that he's capable of doing things and living on his own and functioning as an independent person. She's refusing to go, anywhere. She hasn't been to see me for years. I think it was like 6 or 7 years at first. And then now, even if she does come, it's usually around a week max. She doesn't, a few days. She doesn't really want to stay more because she's always concerned that he's not doing great. My father does not want to come over. Mainly, it's not even that he doesn't want to come over. He probably does want to, but the plane journey is quite concerning to him. He wouldn't want something to go wrong in that sense. So he claims it's better to not provoke the luck. He's been lucky enough to stay with us as long as he has. So there's no point taking the risk right now. For my father, he's worried he's not going to feel well, or he's going to faint, or something will happen that he's not going to be in control of himself, and he will need help in one way or another. And it's, let's say, the drama that follows behind. So, if you faint on the plane, they need to land because they don't know what's happening. If you go to a different country, you don't speak the language or anything, and something happens there, you're really struggling to communicate, and they don't have your history of what's going on. There's a lot of stress in that respect, but it definitely gave me a different perspective as well, because I've heard somebody say, I can't remember who it was, my father is 66 this year, or 67. On the 25th of May, he will be 67. So I can understand, him not wanting to come, but equally, I'm aware that I probably don't have, another 60 years left with them. it might be 5, it might be 10, it might be 20, it might be 30. And if I go to see my parents twice a year or 3 times a year, it's almost a countable number. So the way I look at it after this experience, it's more of a, even if I'm given 10 years with both of my parents, and I go to see them 4 times a year every year. That's 40 meetings, 40 hugs, 40 occasions I will be able to hug my father, hug my mother, have a conversation with them. And every year it will be less. So in that respect, it kind of opened my eyes and it changed my priorities as well. I mean, to be fair, there's loads of things that I've learned since in terms of how to process situations like that. My natural reaction, like I said before, is to just push all the emotions away, get out of my way. I need to be task focused. I need to go there. I need to speak to the doctor. I need to deal with this, that, and the other. And then I would have that delayed reaction of complete breakdown, complete meltdown a couple of weeks later, once, in terms of the actual situation, it's relatively stable or settled. And it was very unhealthy for me and how I was processing all of that. So in that sense, one thing that has definitely helped me get through that stage was to have like the emotions diary or diary of emotions, where you actually write down how you feel, what you feel, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, whether it's, feeling of unfairness, whether it's worry or, sadness or whatever it might be. Just write it all down on the paper, and then try and not look back in the sense of last week or, last month. Try to look forward, and a few years later, or once the whole thing is settled, and then you can look at it, you will see how much of all of this was kind of clouding your rational judgment and your emotional state. Because I do understand, the diagnosis is crushing for the person hearing it. It's also crushing to all the family and stuff, but the life goes on. We still need to go to work. We still need to function in one way or another. And if we're going to allow all of these negative visions, emotions, and fears to take over that life, we're not really helping anybody. And I also think, I mean, I was in a very specific dynamic, right? It was my parent, it was my father. My father was never very affectionate or, highly emotional. He's always been, quite distant. I don't think I remember him ever kissing me or, hugging me in public, or, saying he's very, very happy or he's very appreciative or proud of me in one way or another. But he would show that with what he would do. So if we would go to an ice cream shop, for instance, and I would say, I want 3 scoops of ice cream, he wouldn't even question it. He knew I'm never going to eat 3 scoops. So he would have one, or he wouldn't take any, just so I can try all 3. In those situations, he would always show how much I meant to him. He was allowing me to drive the car even before I had a driving license, in the sense of trying it on a safe road. He was teaching me all sorts of things as well. I think professionally, I am where I am today because of him as well. And he has taught me that very specific and strategic way of thinking. But you also kind of see the downside. So my parents never had very affectionate and loving relationship either. And, me being 35 now, I realize that I've inherited that pattern as well. And my first long-term relationship has fallen apart exactly for that reason, that I couldn't really be honest and open and vulnerable enough with the other person. So it's it's really eye-opening in terms of how you actually, what are the features and skills you actually inherit in a grand scheme of things. And if I'm honest, if I think about it, if I was diagnosed with a cancer ever, I'd probably never tell anyone. So I can understand why my father never did that as well. I mean, the interesting part is my father never allowed me or my mum to go to a hospital with him. He's always done it on his own. My mum would drop him off to the car park and she would wait for him for hours in the car park because he did not want her to come into the building with him. So in that sense, I mean, there is obviously the record that my father has at home of all the procedures and visits, etc. But he didn't want us to participate, and I don't really want to start digging into that because I don't think it would be fair. But equally, I've started volunteering with a care home down the road from me, which is specializing in dementia people, and I think that has opened my eyes a lot to how much patience we need and how lucky we are that, you know, that person in that chair in front of you, it's not one of your parents, and that you still have that huge opportunity that you should be grateful for, of having your parents with you, being able to talk to them, being able to hug them, understand them, and for them to recognize you. I think the big struggle that people with a brain tumor or after a brain tumor have, and I know my father certainly do, it's one of those, I call it the invisible disabilities, right? So it's something you can't see. You don't have a big scar on your forehead or, you know, a tattoo saying I went through a brain tumor. But even to this day, my dad sometimes feels dizzy, or, you know, he needs to sit down because he just don't feel right. And he needs a couple of minutes silence, and that's all. And people don't see that as a disability. It's very hard to recognize in that sense. And a lot of the time, I also think that people are very narrow-minded in that sense. They don't really, it's not something that's very well known. That's not really something that's spoken about a lot. And that's why people are completely unaware of it. It's not a very fancy, you know, illness in that sense, where, you know, it's popular and spoken by all the stars, and, you know, like dementia and Bruce Willis or whoever, where, you know, it's actually shown out there in TV. It's not something that by just looking at the person you will notice. So I think there's changes that, you know, are going in the right direction. I just think it needs to be a little bit more spoken about for the society awareness rather than anything else.
This is the Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show. It's a show full of informative chat and inspirational messages. The Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show on podcast.